Hey guys, it's Sam and this is Top 5 Wednesday. If you are new to Top 5 Wednesday, I will leave a link to the Goodreads group down below for topics and such. This week's topic is books for your younger self. So this was actually a topic that was recommended to me on Twitter. I asked, I'm bulk filming a ton of videos before I'm going on vacation. So yeah, I'm filming this before I've even gone down to Florida for BookNet Fest and for seeing Sarah Jane and everything. But I wasn't sure what to film and someone recommended this as a possible topic and I was like, that's a great topic for Top 5 Wednesday. But it's also pretty challenging. So the whole theme of this topic is books that you wish your younger self had read because of maybe adding to your self-esteem or giving you a better worldview or a new perspective or something like that. And there's a ton of books that I'm like, ooh, I would have had fun with these when I was younger, but these are more books that I feel like could have potentially taught me something, but also it's super difficult to think of myself as a teenager. I mean, it's been a while, over 10 years obviously, since I've been in those shoes and I've changed so much. Especially in your 20s, you just change so much and I've had a lot of big life events that have really impacted my particular personality. So it's hard to think back to what I was like as a teenager and I know what I was like as a teenager, but my thought processes, you know? So I'm probably taking this a little bit too seriously, but it's fine. So the first book, or rather a series, is Under the Never Sky by Veronica Rossi. This is a dystopian young adult series and it came out I think around the post-Twilight saga time of young adult releases because it definitely has some similar beats to Twilight. But the thing about this series is the relationship in here is incredibly healthy, and even though there's some things the two main characters get separated in the second book, every YA that came out around that time, their relationship is so strong, and then they also have really strong friendships, and I think that would have been a good alternate perspective to what Twilight was showing, which I loved Twilight, as most people did at the time. So having this kind of toxic codependent relationship juxtaposed by this that was not codependent and they were really independent people and they both had their strengths and they both supported one another, right after Twilight, because it still had some of those same beats that would have felt really homey to me at that time, I think this would have been a good book for me in my teen years. Then we have Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. This is a book that's all about fandom, but also the main character has some mental health stuff going on, such as anxiety and depression. And when I was a teenager up into adulthood into only very recently, I had unmanaged panic disorder and anxiety. And I still have anxiety. Anxiety never goes away. But my panic attacks are now controlled by medication that works for me. And I think seeing someone even having anxiety would have been so groundbreaking for me because I lived my entire teen years not knowing that I had a mental health condition. It was talked about as you have a nervous stomach. It was treated like indigestion, and no one told me you have anxiety until I was an adult, and the damage had been done of the years of stress and panic and just awfulness trying to manage this thing that I didn't know was actually a thing and something that I blamed myself for and thought even, as part of my anxiety that something else is causing it. Oh my gosh. Living with a mental health disorder that you don't know what it is, especially as a teenager, is horrific. So this would have been fantastic to actually see a book character that had anxiety and relating to that, and also seeing them participate in fandom, which it would have been different back then. In fandom, we still had Zanga and LiveJournal than the fandom in here, but it still have been so cool just to see that because I was kind of dipping my toes into that, and I think I would relate to this book a ton when I was a teenager. I relate to it now, but even as a teenager, it would have been really cool. Then we have Since You've Been Gone by Morgan Matson. This is a contemporary story, and it's about a girl whose best friend kind of takes off, something happens, so she leaves her a list of things to do, experiences to have, kind of a summer bucket list. And I related to this a lot as an adult reading this a couple years ago when I read it because I was I am this main character. As a teenager, again, my personality is really fleshed out over the years and I've gotten to be a lot more outspoken and independent and all these things. But as a teenager, and I feel like a lot of people do this, you have this best friend, and I always bonded with people who have really large personalities, and I still do, but I feel like a lot of times I had best friends in high school that really overshadowed me and that I became almost codependent with, and I didn't have a lot of my own experiences because I was anxious and nervous and whatever. And I think, again, having something like this where it's I could see myself in it and also see look, you can do more and you can try these new things and you don't have to be like attached to your best friend and you can make other friends and all that stuff would have probably prevented a lot of stress, because I'm sure some of you have also these kinds of experiences of, as a teenager, having these friendships that implode as like a, you know, preteen and teen, when you have this best friend and they're like your most important thing, and then something happens and you have a falling out and you have to like rebuild from scratch. If you have a larger friend group, that doesn't happen. So I think just seeing this kind of story would have been, again, similar to Eliza and Her Monsters, a little more illuminating, and probably wouldn't have pushed me into my current personality that quickly, because it took, you know, a terminal illness to really push me over the edge, but it maybe would have helped a little bit sooner. Who knows? Then we have Graceling by Kristen Kishore. This is another one I think would have been good in like that post-Twilight kind of time period. And also I was reading a lot of urban fantasy books that had really toxic relationships with really toxic masculinity and some borderline abusive tropes in them. And this relationship in here, one, Katza is a wonderful human who is completely independent, and two, her relationship with Poe is amazing. And again, they're supportive, they are not codependent, they are independent, they both go off and do their own thing and still really deeply care about one another. And I think that would have been a really good example for me, again, as a teenager who really romanticized things like, oh, I wish a guy would start a fight with another guy over me. And also Katza is asexual. I mean, it's not really confirmed in the book, but if you see it, then you kind of realize it a little bit. So I think even seeing that would have been really good for me as a teenager, not knowing things and kind of trying to figure out their own identity and everything like that. So yes, this would have been a good book for like other relationship perspectives than just toxic masculinity, codependence, dude bros. And lastly, we have The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in a town that is fairly segregated. I mean, not officially, obviously, but my side of town was very white, upper middle class, and I went to a private school, which also was very white and upper middle class, and I just didn't have a lot of experiences with other people of different races, different gender identities, different religions, really, like anything, until I was an adult and moved to the East Coast and just got very immersed in that. But in my hometown, it was very like the same as me, and I think having another perspective would have been very good for me. I didn't know anything about racial inequality and police brutality or anything, just because of the area that I was in and the nature of where I grew up, and no one talked about it, and at that time it wasn't on the news, and it just like, I didn't know anything about anything. So I think a book like this, where it showed another person's perspective and another person's life and what they lived with every day, would have been incredibly illuminating. And I'm glad that there are books like this out there now, and movies coming out of this book, which I've seen like the trailers for and cry like every time. But I think that's so helpful to people who are closed off from a lot of things and don't even know that they can seek out these other perspectives because they're so in their own perspective and surrounded by people just like them. So I think this would have been incredibly helpful for another perspective as a teenager, and I'm really glad that this is a book that's available to people now. So those are some books that I wish my younger self would have had. Comment them below and let me know some of your books that you wish your younger self would have had access to. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye!